Well, so honored to be here and to have this conversation with you guys. And I wanted to start on a little bit of a personal note. We just heard, starting with you, Kennedy, we just heard about your background. You grew up with extreme hardship, not just poverty, but also experiencing abuse, homelessness, violence, a lot of things that for many people would have led down a path of self-destruction, I think, regardless of what opportunities came later. And so I wondered, where you think the resilience comes from that got you to here where you are today. Is it something that you were born with? Is it something that developed over time? I guess put it in the context of this conversation about storytelling, the world is telling you one story about your life and the value of your life, but you were able to rewrite that in a pretty dramatic way. So where did that come from?
Oh, thanks so much, Anna. So thank you so much. I think when you struggle a lot in your life, and most of my friends, I said before, are dead, and you somehow make it, you know what I mean? Then, as David Brooke talked about it, you come to a place whereby enough is enough, and you want to give yourself for better good, which can go two ways, either to be a suicide bomber, or kill yourself, or use your life for something positive. So I think the events that when I was growing up, I survived. I think that also has something to do with it, that I kind of survived, whereby more people that I knew didn't make it. You know what I mean? So somehow you get lucky on the street, you didn't get killed, you didn't commit suicide. So then it's something that we discuss in Kibera even now, because when you come from really, it's sad. You either make it or you're ruined. There's no middle. I'm not kidding you. There's no middle. Where I come from, there's no middle. Those who have made it and those who are really, their life has been ruined away.
Jessica, the two of you, for anyone who doesn't know, wrote a wonderful book together about the story of SHOFCO and about your relationship and meeting. And in it, there's this really funny anecdote about when you first arrived in Kibera. You go to meet Kennedy. You're a student at Wesleyan at the time, an exchange student. You've come to work with SHOFCO and then fledgling theater arm of it. And you gave him this kind of very earnest talk about how you were there to learn and you were aware of your privilege, but you didn't want to come in as this outsider. And so I was wondering if you could just tell that story for everybody. And then I have a question about it, but first could you just tell that?
Sure. So as Kennedy said in his talk, I sent him an email, the summer before my semester abroad in Kenya. I heard about Kennedy just through a small world, I guess, kind of fate almost, and heard about what he was doing and the ambitions of SHOFCO. At that point, a really kind of concept, a youth group. And I sent him an email and said, hi, I want to work with you. Can I come and live with you and your family in Kibera? And I think that for me at that moment in time, and probably for many of us, it's very difficult to imagine and to conceptualize what a place like Kibera actually looks like. So of course I looked on Wikipedia, but I had no actual idea. And so when I asked Kennedy if I could live with him, he wrote back and said, absolutely not. And that for me was like the moment that I was determined. And I think that when I first saw Kibera and when I met Kennedy and I was on a program studying international development, part of what struck me so immediately was just this history and this legacy of people who look like me, who have the best of intentions, but who come in to help people or to teach people. And I felt just so sure that I didn't think I could help anyone, and I had so much more to learn than to teach, and that there needed to be some sort of repositioning of the power dynamic of these years and years and this legacy and this history of how development has been enacted on people. And so I said to Kennedy, I want to do something radical, and I felt the only way to do this would be to live in your community, to not go home to a comfortable hotel or homestay at the end of the day. And Kennedy said, it's crazy, there's no way, there's no shower, there's no running water. And I looked at him and I said, well, if you could do it, why can't I? what's different about why are you less human than me? And part of what I felt all along the way was that even by living in Kibera, that wasn't a way to equalize the power dynamic between us. Because the truth was, I could always leave. And no one around me had that option. And I was always aware of that and very conscious of it, but even in living in the community, I think what I was able to do was to at least show that I wanted to be there at night, and I wanted to see what the world really looked like. And in the first week I lived there was a line of people outside the door each morning to see if the white girl had made it through the night. And so I got used to an audience, brushing my teeth, doing whatever. But I think that over time, people got less and less interested, and it just started to become, I got an incredible window into a world that I recognize so few people like me will ever get to see.
And do you still now, how do you think about it now in terms of your insider-outsider status? Because then you were coming into this world you were completely unfamiliar with. Now it's different. You guys are family. You've started this organization. You're very connected to the community. But how do you now think of your status in terms of straddling the two worlds?
That's a great question. Well, I think that something I think about a lot is no matter how much time I spend in Kibera or in Mathare or in the other slums that we work in, there's something that will always separate us, which is that I don't know what it feels like to be hungry. And that is a reality, daily reality, for so many of the people that we work with. And I think that's not something you can understand if it's not your experience. So I think that as I've lived in this community, as these people have become my friends, my family, I've also never fooled myself that I'm not an outsider. And so I think that's an important thing to always kind of keep in the back of your mind, that you can be inside, but you'll always be outside. And so something I think about a lot, just with Kennedy and my story together, is, how random it is where we're born. And I happened to be born in Denver, Colorado. I don't know who decided that. I don't know how that happened, but somehow it did. And Kennedy and our girls, they happened to be born in Kibera. And that just happened too. And there's no rhyme or reason. There's something so unfair about the fact that so much of our lives are determined by something we have no influence over, which is simply where we're born. And so I think how I look at it today is, how do I use the fact that I was born into a world of privilege by comparison? How do I use my privilege to do the most good for as many people as I can? Mm-hmm. And in partnership with them, not my going out and doing it for them, but really standing behind Kennedy, who had a vision of what change would look like, what that would look like in his community, and saying, let's get all the resources we can behind a leader and a vision like that.
I want to bring Jamal into the conversation, and I hope as we go on that you guys will feel free to just jump in and have a conversation, But you are in the process of writing a film about SHOFCO and the story behind it. So there are so many stories within the story. There's the story of the organization. There's this incredible story of you guys falling in love and building it together. There's the students and how they've been impacted. So what are you focusing on in all of that, and why? I guess what to you is the story of SHOFCO?
Well, my connection to the story, Richard LaGravenese, who's a writer and producer, and Tony Goldwyn, who will direct the film, approached me because they knew of my background growing up in the Bronx and Harlem, joining the Black Panther Party when I was 15, spending time in that community work, the breakfast program, the medical clinics, spending time in prison where I started a theater company. And it wound up being, when I got there, people know I had been part of the Black Arts movement, and some of the older Black prisoners came to me and said, man, you should do something for Black History Month. And I said, really? And they said, yeah, you really should. So I went to the prison library, and there was only one Black play, A Raisin in the Sun, truth be told, only 2 plays, Romeo and Juliet, which I knew was out the question. And I came back with A Raisin in the Sun saying, guys, I don't know if we could do this because this is about a black family and, in fact, a woman, a matriarch trying to save her family. And without a beat, they said, don't worry about it, Jamal. Just look out in the yard, point at 4 or 5 guys. We'll put a dress on them. This is what made me a playwright. I said, I'm not going to point people out. I wrote a play. As we started rehearsing, the Mexican mafia, prisons are segregated because people segregate themselves. And La M, some guys from the Mexican mafia, came to the rehearsal, and they never show up any place, literally, unless it's a beef, and usually to kill somebody. And the 2 leaders came, and they had life sentences after they were in prison, right? It was like they stabbed somebody and just like, give me another life sentence. You want my license too? And they're sitting on the side, and I'm working with the prisoner, and one of the guys came to me, and he said, hey, man. He said, yo, S.A., let me speak to you. I was like, damn, it's me. I just got here. And he pulls me to the side. He said, I've been sitting here watching you, S.A., for about 20 minutes, and I want you to listen to me good. That guy you're working with, S.A., that guy, S.A., he's not feeling his character. So I said, why don't you get involved? And he was good. And so I rewrote the play. And then one of the White brothers, right, dangerous guy from the South, his name was Reb, right? Confederate flag tattoo, 6'4", black belt in karate. Reb comes to rehearsal, and he comes back after, because the White brothers were like, the blacks and the Mexicans are sneaking off. This is not good for us. And Reb comes back after 2 hours, and all his guys surround him, kidnappers, bank robbers, you know. And they were like, Reb, you was with them, the blacks and the Mexicans? And Reb said, yep. They said, what are they doing, Reb? He said, a play. They said, well, what did you do about it, Reb? He said, well, they give me a part. And against all odds, we formed our own section of the yard. And truth-telling started to happen in that circle for men that were raised to believe to hate each other and that they shouldn't be together. And then after I got out of prison, I'm doing similar work in Harlem. I have a youth program, mainly of young women, doing theater and arts and activism. And so when I read the book, I was transformed as people who've read it or know the story was. And then I got to meet Kennedy and Jessica, and wanted to try to tell the story. And it's such a big and powerful story. The only way to approach it, and then I had a chance to go with Tony to visit and to spend time in Kabir and to spend time with them, is to try to understand what the truth are. I have a friend named Sekou Sundiata, who was a wonderful scholar and playwright and activist and a professor at the New School. And Sekou had been a heroin addict when he was a teenager. And I said, Sekou, I want to do a story about your life because the way that you've transformed and the way that you kind of use now spoken word and scholarship and all of that, I said, I'd like to tell that story. And he again, without missing a beat, and he says, you want the facts, Jamal, or you want the truth? Because I can tell you the truth, but you can't have all the facts. So this kind of storytelling is what is the truth of the moment? How do you take a life that is transformed, or 2 lives that have transformed hundreds of thousands and soon to be millions of lives? How do you take a book that's amazing, that's close to 400 pages and make it a 2-hour story? You spend time and you try to look at what the truth of that is. And what's beautiful about this is similar to what I discovered in Leavenworth, what I discover every day with the young people, is that it was specific about the truth. It is going to touch the world because there is a little bit of all of us in this story. There's a little bit of those challenges, a little bit in that fear, and mainly there's a lot of that hope.
You know,
That's good.
it's parallel. You talked about the theater work you've done, and that was one of the first pieces of SHOFCO was these theater workshops that you did, and that was how, Jessica, you originally came to work with SHOFCO. You volunteered for that piece of it. Kennedy, where did you get the idea in the first place to make theater a part of this organization? Correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't grow up doing theater, going to a lot of plays, that kind of thing. So where did this idea come from that should be part of the organization?
Oh, yeah. So thank you. We used to do what's called ambush theater. You know, so we come and ambush you, and you get scared, then we perform. I hope they do that in America too, yeah? But that was the agenda for us to bring the attention of people. And it really came from the women abuse, that most of the time we do things that we don't know we are doing. So it really was more like a therapy for us, and just to let the community see themselves. I used to be really, honestly, the drunkard husband in the play. I drank, I would come back home, I want food, and I'm beating my wife. And the audience would be like, no, no. And I loved it because I felt like they are now reflecting with me. So it became more as a tool of educating them. I never knew there's a place you go and sit down and eat popcorns and something happened. No, really, never. This is just, we just came up with the idea of ambush theater. You know, to tell our stories as a way to educate. Because sometimes in our life, and I believe this strong in my heart, sometimes you do things that you don't know you are harmful. And really, we use the ambush theater to tell people how to use condoms. One example, this crazy idea is that when the North comes with condoms, they hand over them to us. And we don't know what to do with them, so some people were using 3. Think about this, nobody come and say, it's 1. They just give you the condoms, you know, in Kibera, condom, you know. So we are getting diseases, you know. So we came together and in SHOFCO theater, and we were able to go out and say rubber and rubber doesn't work, you know. And people were taking notes. You know? So theater became a way of educating our community.
And it's amazing, you know, in the book you talk about how young people would come in to do these theater exercises and then really open up through them and tell these incredible and sometimes incredibly painful stories about their lives because of this freedom that they had for whatever reason through it being in the framework of theater. Could you guys talk about that a little? Some of the stories that came out and how people were affected by just the fact that it was this theater medium?
So, and when I met Jessica, so Jessica came in to the movement to teach us how to write our plays. That's how you came in, yeah? You're going to help us to record them. We wanted to record things for our generation to come in Kibera. And, but something happened later on, postelection violence. So Jessica really taught me and the community and the youth how theater can also be a way of just tears and just speaking the truth, you know. And so I remember, I just going to talk about that. I remember when it's so sad, the people that I knew very well and I love, ethnic community were killing each other. We were SHOFCO members, the people were killing each other because of tribal things. So Jessica came in, and we'll talk about that. That was really powerful, Jessica. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, so when I went back to Kenya the second time, right after this post-election violence, this period where neighbors, people who had lived together for decades, turned on one another because of this narrative about tribe. And I think it just goes to say that, you know, the stories that a culture tells itself really matter. And so Kennedy and I set out to create another play with a group of young people who had committed violence against one another or against members of one another's family. So it was quite heated. You know, in the room, I remember there was a boy who had killed the sister of another boy in the group. And these people were in this room because there was nowhere else to go. It was still one community. People were still going to live together. And so I think that, you know, what we were trying to use theater as a tool for was how do we reckon this impossible situation? How do we live with the constraints that tomorrow we're going to wake up on the streets and still see each other, still be in this world, in this community? And I think it did become a space through which people could process what had happened. And even before the post-election violence, when we did another piece of theater, it was about these young people's stories. And stories like Kennedy, you know, what were the challenges that they had been through? There was a girl who talked about drugs and the reality of drugs and addiction, and how that had become her path when she felt hopeless. There was another young woman who had lost her baby, and had a baby, and the baby had died, which is not uncommon in the places that we work. And I think that is I just had a baby 2 months ago, and so something I think about a lot is just the staggering reality of childbirth in places like Kibera and Mathare, which our health work today really seeks to address. But I think that having a space to talk about this and to tell these stories was incredibly empowering. And in many ways, how SHOFCO started, the story Kennedy shared in his acceptance speech of coming together with young people in his 10 by 10 room and saying, what are our problems and what are the solutions? And really giving young people the place to brainstorm and to envision what that could look like. And in many ways, I think what SHOFCO's work is today sprouted from the stories of those young people and from the challenges that they face, but also this incredible power that when you come together and you talk about something and you're empowered to say, look, what would you do differently? People can come up with amazing, amazing things. I mean, I think Kennedy and I both, just being here today, would have never thought that would be part of our story. And I think that does matter, the spaces that people have to tell stories, and the narrative of global development, I think, hasn't said to someone like Kennedy, you could imagine what the future looks like, you could do it. And so I think today is a really momentous day for that reason.
Yeah. What do you hope, Jamal, that, your movie, let's say it's done, it's out in theaters, people go to see it, what do you hope people would take away from it? Is it that they would learn more about this specific organization and this work that the story is about, or by the time it becomes a finished creative work, is it about something else, something more universal that you hope they take away?
Yeah, I think that people, that when you're telling a story as powerful as this, that you want to create a film that raises awareness, educates as well as entertains. I think both are important, because I think if people think it's a downer, I have to see it because it's my duty, I have to kind of see it, then it won't have the kind of reach that you want for people to go see it in theaters and people to tell their friends about it and to really be inspired about that. And there's a tradition of the storyteller in Africa known as the griot, the African griot, and he or she would be the village storyteller, and that griot had to do two things really well. They had to educate the community, but they also had to be entertaining. So if you didn't one and not the other, you weren't a great griot, right? If you were really academic and you knew the history of the tribe, but you were boring, the young people would go like, I'm going to the next village, I had my nap, that griot was boring. But if you were a great griot and you had, you could do the spoken word and play the drum and do the dance, really entertaining, but your facts were wrong, people would be in the back like, I don't know, I really don't know. I was on that hunt, and the griot's talking about, say, who killed that lion? But it was his little sister Keisha. I was there, dog, I'm telling you. And this is not hard to do with their story, because there is really joy and entertainment and ups and downs that's going to make it a great story, and they do live with joy. And so it is that story of courage in the face of non-being, but it's also joy when it's clouds, when you can't see the sun. And so there are funny stories that I've learned from Ken. Just hanging out with them is just a trip, during the course of the day. The people that come up, all of the various characters. One of the images that stuck with me, and I was talking about this earlier, is, I was walking down in Manhattan the other day, walking down Broadway with my wife past the Sheraton Hotel. There was a family from out of town, a white family, and there were two little girls who were there. Their parents were trying to figure out where to go, and they had no toys, nothing, and they were just playing with each other. Two little white girls. One was maybe 5, the other was 4. And they were having the best time in the world, just being little girls in that moment. And I had to fight back tears, because I remember being in Kibera, seeing little children with nothing in the street, where it was dusty, where there was not, and I say street, it's a road, it's unpaved, just playing, and they were full of joy. And I was hit by that same thing that Jessica's been talking about, that randomness of life. But at the heart and soul of it, children just want to laugh and have fun and be safe and be loved. So if you can hit those moments, and if people could know, man, and if people could talk about it in different ways, you won't believe how funny it was, or you won't believe this moment, I never knew what was going to happen next, and you won't believe that the most unlikely thing happened, and they're talking about it in that way for people to see the story, and then let that lead them to the book if they haven't read the book, and let that lead to what SHOFCO is doing, and most importantly, let that lead to a difference they can make in their own lives. If we accomplish any of that, then I think we've made a good film.
Yeah. Do you guys, do you guys feel any pressure now that you're here? The organization is what it is. You started with 20 cents and a soccer ball, and now here we are, well, not we, here you are at the Hilton Foundation. We are physically here. Yeah, do you feel pressure, and are there any pitfalls that you're wary of, now that you are the size that you are, and get the kinds of grants and donations that you get? I guess, are there any pitfalls that you feel that you need to look out for? Not that of course, Hilton Foundation is wonderful, and this is a wonderful event, but do you feel that?
And I think you're definitely here with us. No, I think I think how Kennedy and I have built the organization was we never set out with the idea that we would win prizes or recognition. Even when we thought about or got asked to write a book, we really thought about it, and we sort of thought about why we would do that. And I think that what we came up with is just how could we share our experiences, our lives, our stories in a way that they could be inspiring or resonate with others. And if you read the book, you might look at the cover and think, oh, this is just going to be the perfect glossy story of how these people just did this. And when we were writing, we really struggled because that's not how this has happened. It's been hard, and there have been challenges, all along the way. And we said to each other, well, let's just write the real version, and we'll edit it later. And then we never went back to edit it. So what you have is the really raw, honest account of how we got here. And so I think that setting out and kind of thinking about let's just do this to do the work, just how Kennedy started with the idea of let's shine a light, and if we do that, if we shine a light, other people will see it and they'll want to be part of it, is I think how we approach it each day. So today is an incredible day to be here with all of you, to celebrate all of the people. It's not just us, there's so many people who have made it possible for us to be here. But then tomorrow there's more work to do. So I think that kind of keeping that perspective is how we're here today, and how we'll move forward in the future.
Yeah. What all of you can really weigh in on this, but maybe Kennedy, starting with you. What do you think are the keys to really effective grassroots organizing and building something from the ground up? How do you get buy-in from the local community?
Thank you, Anna. I think the first thing is to get the trust from the community. And what I've really learned is that I was one of the persons who lived in a slum. And every time somebody came with an idea, I don't remember ever saying no. Because we are scared, we are poor. So you come, you want to build a toilet, I'll say, yes. I want to buy you guys shoes in Kibera. Is that okay? Do you need shoes? I'm like, yes, I need shoes. You know what I mean? I want to buy you bread. Yes, I want bread. So we never, because poverty really poverty takes away your dignity and give you this fear. And you are not spoiled. So when somebody tells you like, I want to do this, you are like, going to run away. You're like, yes. So I really feel like, so it takes time for people to be like, you know what? I'm within the community. It doesn't matter. Shoes is not a good idea, but I'm going to be here with you. Because people are scared like, you're going to go away. You'll never come back. So if they see you, this is our plan before in Kibera. I'm giving you our secrets. We want to milk as we can. We want to milk this person. You are somebody coming to Kibera and you want to do a project. We want to milk you as we can because we know, the chance of you coming back is less. Okay? So what SHOFCO did is that community movement. This is our thing. And we had no money. So I think the best way to run a grassroots organization is to create the trust, people to trust each other in the movement.
Yeah, I think subtlety and precision actually really matter. So the word grassroots, the word community-led, we hear them all the time in the development sector, but what do they really mean and look like? And I think something of significance here is that Kennedy started SHOFCO 5 years before I met him. And for 5 years, there was not a cent of outside funding. But it's a long time to stay committed to an idea, to persist on this vision that they could do it for themselves. And I think that platform is critical because there are so many people who come from the outside, who look like me, who go in and say, oh, I'm going to do this with someone, here's my partner, but it's still kind of driven and originating from the outside. So I think what I would say is actually doing in partnership is not enough, that it has to be done by and led by, and the idea and the original vision has to come from the inside, actually without partnership, because that's how that vision is really true to what the community needs. And from there, other people, factors, partners can come in and really amplify and propel and take that vision forward. But I think that matters, and I think that something amazing, SHOFCO today is not just in Kibera. We're in 7 urban slums across Kenya. 3 of those have started in the last 6 months. And how they started was through SUN, which is the SHOFCO Urban Network. And what that does is it's people. It's young people, it's women, it's people in their own community saying, I want to take this and I want to do it for myself. And so Kennedy went to Mombasa, where one of these slums that has come forward and is taking and doing this. He had never been there before. And there were maybe 700 people in the room. And these people were there because they had a vision for their own lives. And so I think today the power of SHOFCO and what this moment will allow us to do is to take that model and to, instead of going to places and saying, do this, follow us, take this, actually have places start it themselves. And I think that's the power.
And on the theme of the gathering today, which is resetting the compass, this is powerful, and people have said it all day in different ways, and it's really powerfully exemplified by the listening that they do, that Kennedy and Jessica still do. In the time that we spent with them, the amount of time that they spent listening to folks, even as people were lined up at the clinics and coming to get the water, the meetings that would happen at night that would go far into the night, I can testify to it, where people would come and Kennedy would just be listening, and Jessica would just be listening to what was going on, what needed to happen next. And so years ago I sat with Manning Marable, Dr. Manning Marable, distinguished professor who had been at Harvard and in his last few years at Columbia, and I said, what would you tell young organizers? And that came up at a time when the movement was youth-led. A lot of people here were part of the anti-war movement and knew what that was about, to be in college campuses and then to come back home and to challenge parents and to challenge businesses that war was wrong, that violence was wrong, that racism was wrong, that Dr. King, who was very young when he led the movement. We have to keep in mind Dr. King was 38 when he died. He started leading that movement at 26, and he did this great speech at Riverside Church, which was, to me, just as important and as great as the I Have a Dream speech, where he talked about poverty, racism, and war, militarism, racism, and poverty. And that the movements that came up in the inner cities, the Young Lords, the Panthers, the student movements, the folks that was doing were youth-led and were young people saying, we will figure out how to fix it. And the best advice that we're getting from the people that preceded us is that we have to listen and we have to build. And Kennedy always says this is a movement, because a movement can't be bought and can't be sold. It is validated on the lives of people. It is driven by the energy of the people and what they need. And the main fuel for that movement, and you talk to anyone then and now, that makes someone get up in the morning when they're tired, that make someone find out how to get other people food when they're hungry. Whether it's what Kennedy did when he was in SHOFCO, what Young Panthers did when they had a breakfast program, is the idea that the greatest force of social change is love, is to have an undying love for the people. And when you have that, you can't look at any human being that's suffering and not feel your own suffering. And that's the real power of change, and that's the real reset, I think, here.
So I want to add something on Jamal. So when I used to live in Kibera, I wanted so badly to keep that house that I lived, that SHOFCO started, and very small time, 10 by 10. So I bought it in the slum. So almost after 8 years, I've not slept in. But Jamal and Tony Goldman together, we went and spent the night in the slum. And that house now, we call it a shrine, because it's a place that you go there, you just feel. And Jamal left that room really different, you know?
Yeah,
so he was able
absolutely.
to spend time together.
Yeah, no, it's the same house that they lived in.
Jessica.
And so we had the experience of really being in the heart of the slum, of sleeping there together, of getting up, having to go outside to the area that was the bathroom, right? And then of getting up in the morning, you know, washing up in a basin, brushing our teeth in the basement, and then we walked that same, what was it, 9 miles that you had to walk every day to go to work?
To the factory.
And we did that walk. One way, that was 9 miles, one way that Kennedy went to work in the factory, work really hard, and then walk all the way back for $1 a day. It was transformative, not just that experience, but transformative being around the people of Kibera, the men, the women, and children. It was amazing. I've not seen anything like it. And Tony knew I'd been a Panther, that I'd been in, you know, ghettos and inner cities all across the country, that I'd been in different prisons. And one time we were just standing looking, and Tony said, "Jamal, have you ever experienced anything like this?" And I was like, "No, my brother, I haven't. This is deep."
Yeah, something that I think is really interesting in terms of getting community support is, that maybe you guys could talk about a bit, is how once you got the girls' school piece of it going, which has really become this centerpiece of the organization, you know, some of the other parts grew out of that in a way. You wanted, you knew that if people could see more good coming from the fact that this girls' school existed, then they would support the school and the organization. I was wondering if you could talk about that evolution a little bit.
Yeah, so I was really touched by the plight of women in Kibera. And we wanted to start a school for women to show the community that what it means. And I'm really emotional to see the girls that I met when they were 3 years old. Sitting here today, you know, is crazy, amazing. And I was also scared of men. I'll be honest with you, I was scared of attack for having this idea of building a school for women in a tough neighborhood where there is no basic needs. So we used, if you don't know this, other services. For example, clean water was a way to bring men in. And listen, we have a school for girls, but this school of women going to provide for the community clean water, healthcare. And the need, that's how it really started, you know, as a way, and it became a way to protect the school. So even right now in Kibera, you cannot go and destroy the school for girls, because the men will tell you like, no, you destroy the school for women, you are destroying our health services, you are destroying our clean water. So somehow it was able to integrate organically, because there was a need. And I was able to balance the men's power, you know, so now everybody is benefiting.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that all of you will get a chance to talk to these 5 amazing, now I guess, young women. Because I think what Kennedy's vision was that how do we get a community to change its perception about the value it places on women and girls? I think Kennedy knew intimately, inspired by his mother, that if you invest in a woman, in a girl, you don't just change that girl's life, you change her family, you change an entire community. And when I look at our girls and their vision for what they will do with their education, it's not about them. It's about, and they know that, it's about what that opportunity can do for so many others. And so connecting services to a girls' school makes a school for girls a portal for large-scale change in a society. And I think from there, what we saw was that, if people are always in crisis, if they're perpetually in survival mode, you can't make change. Because if today you're consumed by your sick child and the fact that there isn't a place to get health care, that is all consuming. If you can only think about, how will I pay school fees? How will I put food on the table to feed my family? That kind of crisis is all consuming. So what SHOFCO does is provide services that interrupt survival mode. And once survival mode is interrupted, then people can start to organize. And that's what the Sun platform does, is it brings people together to set an agenda, to set a vision for their community. But if we think 20 years from now, how will urban slums truly change? And it will change if there are new leaders in place who have experienced the realities of life in a place like Kibera and are determined to change it. And so while Sun is setting an internal agenda, there have to be people who care what that agenda says, what that direction is. And so these girls are that future. They are going to be at the top of sectors, top leadership positions, able to truly influence systemic change. And that, I think, is the vision of the school and of this investment in girls who can change the world.
Yeah. Well, with only a few minutes left, I'm going to put you guys on the spot with just a couple of quick lightning round questions. The first being, if, in just a few sentences, if possible, I wanted to hear each of your takes on the theme of the day. No pressure there, but resetting our moral compass in a few sentences. But yeah, what does that mean? What does that mean to each of you? And we can start on either end, whoever is inspired to go first.
Well, I talked a little bit about it before. I think it is the idea of leadership really coming, as Kennedy put it, from south to north instead of the other way around. Not from folks who have it all and know it all and have been around, but for folks who have the least, but have the most to gain and are the most unfiltered in terms of what it's going to take in the urgent now to make a change, and what it's going to take to create something that they can live with as a young generation that will become leaders of today, and then right behind them developing the leaders of tomorrow.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I think that Kennedy spoke about it for a moment in his speech, but I think it's about a new true north for the development sector. And that true north is, it matters where you start from, and it matters where the ideas are coming from as much as it matters where you're going. I think also the reset is about young people and about a new generation of development leaders. Kennedy and I were both in our 20s when we started SHOFCO. Our girls are in their teens, but they have vision for what they're going to do today, not 10 years from now. And I think that handing the reins of leadership to a younger generation, that's the reset the world needs.
Yeah, I want to say that mine is, there is a shift in development, and we're going to see a lot of change. And I think this prize and what the Hilton Foundation is really kind of trying to show us here is that so right now we're going to see a lot of changes whereby communities in Africa or other places in the South are going to organize themselves for transformation. And that will really affect development sector. So I think there's a new shift happening. Thank you.
Kennedy is, and Jessica, the perfect example of something that I like to say and a thought I'd like to leave people with, which is that there's no start date for activism and certainly no expiration date on dreams.
Well, on a final note, who is going to play you in the SHOFCO movie? You're throwing it to
I don't know, Kennedy. Who is it? David Oye? Denzel? I don't know.
well, we hope you'll come and see the movie.
Jessica's going to play you.
Jessica? I don't know. I was looking at Charlize this morning. Every time I see a leading lady, I was like,
Thoughts? Well, I think that's the time we have. So thank you guys so much. Thank you all so much. Thanks to the Hilton Foundation.